Hello, and welcome to my tutorial series on how to make a 2D mobile platform in Unity. In this video, we're going to add some horizontal ground movements to our character. Now, this is a mobile platform series, but initially we're going to be doing all our movements with regular keyboard keys because obviously it will be a little harder to do this with touch controls on a computer or laptop or whatever device you're using to make your games. So let's begin. So we're going to go over to our assets folder. We're going to open up our scripts folder, and we're going to, as soon as it finishes loading, right click, go up to create, and create a new C# script. And we're going to call this one player movement. We're going to open up this script and just give it a second to load. And right away, we're just going to get rid of these. We're just going to get those out of the way for a second. We'll probably come back to them. And we're going to add some things in here. The very first thing is we're going to add a private rigid body 2D. And we're simply going to call it RB for rigid body. So this is calling the actual rigid body, and RB is the name we're giving our rigid body. We can call this anything we want. RB is just nice and sweet and to the point. And then the next thing we're going to put in is a private bool, and we're going to call it hand jump. And then we're going to set that equal to true. After that, we're going to create a couple of what's called serialize fields. Serialize field, and after that, and I'll explain what it is in a second, we're going to put private float, and we're going to call this private float for now movement speed. And then we're simply going to copy, go down here, we're going to paste this in, and instead of movement speed for the second one, we're going to just change this to jump speed. So when we put serialized field, we want to say that we can see our private float in Unity. So sometimes we can put public float and we can see it in Unity, and sometimes we just want to place serialized field here so that it's still private. No other scripts can use it, but we're still going to be seeing it in Unity just in case we want to make adjustments to these numbers. And the reason why you want to do this is usually about processing time. If you make it public, it might take a little longer to process, and if you're dealing with very large games, then it might not make your game function very well, or might create some lag or something like that. So this kind of is a way to avoid that. And this game's not going to be very big, but it's good to get into these habits to understand processing and data management and stuff like that. So next we're going to add in our update function. We're going to put private void update, our parentheses and our brackets. And right below here, we're going to put in another function where this is going to be our movement. So we're just going to simply call it movement, private void movement, parentheses, brackets. And then up here, we're just going to make sure to call our function up here. And that's how we're going to do that. Here, this is going to call this function down here, which we've called movement. And we're going to start off our movement by putting if, and then input dot get access raw. And now you might have seen get access before. If you're completely new, you haven't seen this either. So normally, a lot of people might put just get access and not get access raw. So just regular get access has a built-in smoothing feature that might cause the response of the keys when you press them to be a little delayed. So when you put get access raw, you're eliminating that smoothing feature, and it might create, or it should create, a better response with the keys, which is what we want for this sort of game. So we're going to put in here in our parentheses horizontal, and we're going to put greater than 0. So horizontal is a reference here. We go inside Unity and I go to edit and I go to project settings. Right here I have my input manager. Yours might look like that. Just click down on that drop down, and here's all the inputs or built-in inputs in Unity. So here's horizontal, and as you can see that it applies to different buttons, my left arrow, my right arrow, arrow, the A key, the D key. So it allows the left or right movement, the horizontal movement, and it allows these different kinds of inputs. And you can change these, but we're just going to leave them for right now. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back into my script, and we're going to create another bracket for our if statement, and we're going to say rb.velocity is going to equal a new vector2, and in parentheses next to this, we're going to put that movement speed times time dot fixed delta time, comma, not period, comma, rb dot velocity dot y. At the end, we'll put a semicolon. So in our movement speed function here, we're saying if the input get access raw is horizontal, if we push the A key, the D key, or the left and right arrows, we push it and it's greater than 0, then the velocity of our rigid body, which is our player, is going to equal this new vector2. And if you look, here's this comma, there's two vectors. There's one in the X direction and one in the Y direction. So in the X direction, we want to go our movement speed, whichever we decide that to be, and then we're going to multiply it by this time.fixed delta time. Sometimes you usually see it just as time.delta time, but what this is doing is that it's multiplying it, it's making it independent of the frame rate. So no matter what the frame rate is of your console or whatever you're playing it on, it will play it at the same frame rate. And that's what we're doing when we multiply something by time.delta time, and fixed is just going to create a slightly smaller multiple for that. And then in the Y direction, we basically, this should be dot Y, not comma Y. We just want for right now the velocity to be whatever it is in the Y direction right now. Okay, so now what we're going to do is that this is basically covering our movement to the right. You know, if our horizontal is greater than 0, which would be our D or right arrow or whatever is the right, then it moves this way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just copy this whole thing. We're going to highlight it and copy it. And I'm going to hit Control and V. And right here, I'm going to put an else in front of that. So if I hit the horizontal button, whichever one it is, and it's greater than 0, then, you know, we're moving to the right. Now here I can change this to less than 0. And now I want to put a negative there because it'll be in the opposite direction. It'll go to the left. And then I'm actually going to copy and paste this again, only this time instead of if, it's going to be else. And I'm going to take this whole thing right here, and I'm going to delete it and just put 0. So actually, I don't want all that there either. So just to go over what we did, to recap, is that if our input.access get access raw is the horizontal and it's positive, we're going to the right. And if it's negative, we're going to the left, hence negative movement speed. And if we're not touching at all, then our X velocity, our velocity in the X direction, is going to be 0. So let's see how this all came together. Let's go ahead and save this. Let's go into Unity. And now you'll probably see that it says player movement dot can jump is assigned, but its value is never used. That's because we haven't used it yet. So this little exclamation point is something you should see at this time. We're going to take our player movement script. We're going to drag it over into our inspector window, and we're going to attach it to our player right here. And we are going to go up first, and we're going to go to constraints. Here in our rigid body 2D, you'll come down here. There's this little drop down. It says constraints. It says freeze position in the X and Y direction. If I were to click this, you wouldn't be able to move side to side at all. Can't jump yet anyway, so that's not going to make a difference. But we want to freeze him in the Z direction, which, let's just go here for a second. And here's the X and Y direction. Here's the Z direction. So if we don't freeze it in the Z direction, he'll flip over. So we don't want that at all. So let's go back into our game. Let's go down here. And we haven't added any speeds to our jump and or our movement here. So we're going to go ahead and let's just make this 200, I guess. Just sort of see where it's at. Gonna hit play. And I can go ahead. He moves around pretty quick. And if I let go, he stops automatically because we want a little precision in our game here. So this is what we want to see. So that's it for today. In the next video, we're going to start talking about raycasts, and then we're going to be adding a jump to our character. As always, thank you for watching. Like this video, subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook and Twitter, and support me on Patreon. And a very big thank you to all my Patreon supporters. See you next time.